Mobile hunters, are you looking to make the move to saddle hunting this year? Or maybe you just want to add a few new pieces of gear or upgrade your current saddle gear? If that's the case, then head over to tetherednation.com where they've got all mobile hunters covered. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old timer, Tethered is your one-stop saddle shop. From saddles to ropes, sticks, ascenders, whatever it is you need, they have you covered. I've personally been using their gear for the past 3 seasons now. My base setup consists of the Phantom saddle and the Predator platform. And if you're wondering why I've chosen to use their gear above all else, here's the cliff notes. They're innovative and pushing the mobile hunting forward overall. They cut no corners and prioritize the safety and performance of their gear. They care about the community that they've created, and their gear allows me to hunt free. And above all else, I like to support good people doing good work. If you're interested in upping your mobile hunting game, then head to tetherednation.com. This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. Skull Brew Coffee roasts premium single origin coffee, guaranteeing to deliver the freshest coffee directly to your doorstep. The kicker? They're 2% for conservation certified and donate 10% of their proceeds back to organizations who support the interests of our hunting community. So go to skullbrewcoffee.com and pick up one of their 3-killer roasts and fuel your hunt and fill more tags with Skull Brew Coffee. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 242. Today I'm joined by the Bowhunting Fiend, Greg Litzinger, and we're kicking off another DIY Report mini-series where we answer your listener questions. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine on this early August morning, afternoon, whatever day, or whatever time of day you might be listening to this. I just actually got back from vacation, so my eyes are squarely tuned and focused on the whitetail season that is ahead of us. I always kind of give myself that time, during the summer to try to get some honey-do list stuff done, which I'm fully kind of enthralled in right now and redoing my basement. But, beginning of August, family vacation, kind of spend some time with the fam, focus on that. And then when I come back, aside from wrapping up some of the honey-do list stuff, it is now time to kind of really start, making a game plan and getting ready for the upcoming season. My season will open here in just about a month and a half, maybe just a little less by the time this podcast comes out. And so I do still have, unfortunately, just a few cameras to put out, but they're really kind of in areas where they're more fall areas anyway, so I'm not missing really any summertime trail camera data. I'll probably be going out to do a pool right after that 20th, 22nd time frame that Chad and I talked about previously to try to get all the intel I possibly can from the summer. On some of them that are a little easier access, I might try to check this week, either before work or after work, just to start to understand, what certain areas have to hold for me and what they don't. I still have one trip to make north to do another camera pull, but that probably won't be until, the second half of October, or I'm sorry, the second half of August, and get that kind of out of the way. But vacation was good. Did the typical beach jammer. Of course, got a sunburn, as any good northerner would whenever they go south. Spent the first day on the beach having some adult beverages. Did not apply enough sunscreen and was lobsterized the first day. So solid move there. Also got stung by a jellyfish on the first day. So I kind of really checked all the boxes for a beach vacation in the first probably 48 hours of being on vacation. But now we're back and we're focused on deer hunting, and we're just going to kind of jump into today's podcast. Have a cool share for you guys today. I have my buddy Greg Litzinger on. You guys know him, you love him. And what we ended up doing for this DIY report mini-series, and I'll just be fully transparent and honest with you guys, I don't know how many episodes this is going to create. We podcasted for around 4 hours, I think, and answering all the different questions you guys sent in. Wanted to make sure we got to as many of them as we possibly could. And so we did a long 4-hour session at Greg's place in New Jersey, going through all your listener questions. And in this first session, what we're really kind of covering is talking about adapting to pressure. Of course, you guys well know, if you listen to this podcast for any length of time, Greg's a good friend. we spent a lot of time together scouting, talking deer. And he lives in the high pressure state of New Jersey where there's baiting and stuff like that going on, and so he's very well adept at adapting to pressure on the pieces that he's hunting, whether it's avoiding bait piles or how he's kind of using those bait piles and the people's pressure to his advantage as far as like how it's pushing deer into certain areas of the timber where people aren't. So in this session, we talk about pressure. We talk about, one of the popular things, or one of the things I think is one of the hardest things to kind of start to do as you kind of go through your hunting journey, which is how do you qualify sign when you come across it? How do you know when to hunt it? How do you know how long to sit it before you move on? That's one of the things that we talk about. And then we also talk a little bit about, something that Greg is well versed in, which is hunting, some flatland, because he hunts a lot of swamp, a lot of marsh and stuff like that. And so some of the questions that we talked about were related to how do you approach scouting and hunting some of these areas that are flat and thick and they don't have a lot of necessarily mass crops on them. And so that typical where you're going to find food isn't necessarily a blinking beacon, so to speak, to tell you, hey, deer are going to spend time here, where you have to kind of have a little bit more of a nuanced approach. And so we talk a little bit about that. And then the way we wrap this segment up is really kind of talking about freestyle hunting and run and gun. And I do a lot of freestyle hunting. Greg does and has done a lot of run and gun, in his life for probably the past 20 years. So it's not a new thing for Greg to be doing that. And we talk about the differences between the two, and the similarities between freestyle hunting and that run and gun style of hunting, because there are some very distinct differences. But oftentimes a freestyle hunt may ultimately turn into a run and gun hunt. And so we talk about that and how we both kind of use both of those styles. So with that, two things to pass on to you guys really quickly before we jump into the podcast. One, head over to skullbrewcoffee.com, use the promo code TFTS21, get yourself a discount on some coffee. Check out the backcountry packs that are made specifically for those travel hunts that you guys are going to have this fall, to make sure you have good coffee and not shitty coffee while you're trying to enjoy your hunting trip. And then also TFTS21 will also get you a discount on merch. You can head to my Instagram page. You can buy it straight from the Truth from the Stand Instagram page, or you can head to the link in the bio and head to the merch link, and it will send you off to check out some fresh gear. So, as always, before we jump into today's podcast, I want to make sure to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And back by popular demand, I have none other than New Jersey's favorite son, the Bowhunting Fiend, Greg Litzinger. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, man?
Hanging out at your house, man. It seems like, yeah.
The crowd goes wild.
That's right, man. It feels like every year is around this time we end up hanging out.
Yeah.
This time I'm not making you work for me.
Yeah.
I can tune my bow. I actually have a bow that's functioning.
Yeah.
So all things are good in that department. So,
You just don't jinx yourself. Thanks. You'll be here next weekend.
That's right.
Here, this thing's in 7 pieces. Can you do something?
Yeah, can you fix this piece of shit for me?
I leave for Kansas in 2 days.
Yeah, I know. That's what happened. Isn't that what happened a couple years ago? I blew up my bow right before.
Oh, yeah, like right before we left.
Oh, yeah, right before we left for Montana.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was shitty. That was awesome.
Little triax.
Yeah, that's right.
Cantankerous triax.
That's right. So anyway, Greg and I are together is kind of customary for us here as we get ready to get into hunting season. And this time, what we thought we would do is we would get together. We put out I put out a question thing on the gram, as the kids like to say, and you guys wrote in with some thunder.
Plethora.
Yeah, this. You might even refer to this as a gaggle.
Yeah.
But no, you guys killed it, and you sent a pile of questions in for us to do
Making
during
me work.
Right, yeah, we're putting Greg
should
to work today.
have wrote them down. Someone questioned, I'm like, I need to really think about that one.
I know, right? Well, I did give you the questions of the test at least on this one, so if his answers suck, he has no one to blame but himself. No, you guys killed it. You guys wrote in a lot of really great questions, and this is actually one of my favorite podcasts to do when we get a chance. I try to do these every so often because, I do the podcast every week and, try to answer as many questions during the course of that as I can related to just, hunting topics and strategies and stuff like that. But there are sometimes more specific questions that people have that maybe they haven't listened to all the podcasts or maybe they haven't heard it answered in the recent past. Maybe they're a new listener or whatever the case is. And so I always like to give a chance for the listeners to write in and have us answer some questions. And I've done this with Chad in the past, and now I'm doing it with you. I try to pick one of my buddies that I have that are good hunters and try to come in and answer your questions, and hopefully we help give you some direction and at minimum hopefully
Or misdirection.
yeah, or we gar hole you,
Yeah.
which would be terrible of us to do. But there's a pile of them here. So just as you're listening to this, if you're starting on episode number 1 of this is probably going to be a 2 or 3 part series because, like I said, I think I counted it up, and I want to say, I think we got like 70 some questions or like 60 some questions. So it's going to be quite a lengthy session. I think with that, man, if you're down with it, we'll just get right to it. Well, actually, before we do that, your trail camera today, not to bring up a sore subject.
Yeah.
So when we do this, like Greg and I usually, we'll podcast in the winter together, and we'll usually do like a scouting session together and podcast afterwards. And then, as I'd already said, he and I get together usually this time every year. This time, Greg, graciously invited me to go out and check some trail cameras with him. I'm remodeling my basement, got a bunch of crap going on at home, so I didn't get to make it. However, I did get a picture text to me this morning of one of the trail cameras he had out. And why don't you explain to the good people that are listening what happened to your trail camera on New Jersey public land?
It vanished. Not only did the camera vanish and the lock, but also the 13, 14-inch, maybe even 16-inch tree that it was attached to vanished as well. So somebody literally cut a giant tree down to steal my camera.
Yeah, and we won't belabor this, but I just getting the camera stolen is one thing.
Yeah.
To cut down a huge tree,
That's demoralizing. That hurts my feelings.
it hurts your feelings. But then
You got a chainsaw. So you tell me you don't have bolt cutters? You could have just like cut the bolt, right? The cable lock on it. Like
he was making a point.
yeah, pretty much.
Like, I'm just gonna come in and cut the tree down.
Yeah.
So what we
And I have an idea who might done it. When he cut the tree down, she or they, them, whatever
they are.
yeah, whatever it is, the tree fell in their UTV / four-wheeler trail. So now they don't have to come back and actually cut their tree up so they can drive their four-wheeler on the public land and hunt their baited ladder stand. So it's like you really didn't win anything there, buddy.
The telltale is if you go back and it is cut up so they can get in, then you definitely know who did it.
Yeah.
At that point, it's just crazy, man. Like for one, it's like that's a lot of effort to go through to deter
He was
someone
leaving a
from hunting there.
message.
Yeah, it's certainly leaving a message, and also told us that in this particular area, I know you knew that there was a good deer in there,
Really big one there.
Yeah,
I had 2 cameras stolen actually. That one and the low-hanging fruit, which was one reason I went out today because I had some low-hanging fruit.
right.
And one of them was gone in the same area as that one where I had middle of May, he was a monster, basically. And it's like, so that guy, girl, whatever, they know that deer's in the area.
Yeah.
And they know that what that camera was, it's a pretty thick, nasty, it's a big, wide open spot. The deer they all funnel through.
Right.
So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, so it just kind of proved out that there's one that's living in there. Not only did you have pictures,
I'm gonna kill him, and then I'm gonna just make like a bunch of pictures, and I'm gonna just put it across their little furniture like 1,000. I'll print out like 1,000 pictures.
gonna look like a beautiful mind up in there.
Yes, exactly. And it's gonna hang tree to tree, just pictures of me holding up the deer and say thanks.
Right. Anyway, we won't bring up that bad juju for you.
Here's your deer.
Right. But there is a question in here somewhere, as I read through them previously, that is about bait hunting, like how deer deter it. So it'll be interesting when we get to that because it kind of plays out, in what you're kind of dealing with here with ladder stand with bait there. So we'll just go ahead and jump into the questions, man. So this first one, I'll just kind of tee it up to you, and this is just a general one, and they really just wrote 3 words: was adapting to pressure. And so I think what they really were intending was, when you're hunting an area, be it new, be it a place that's new, how are you kind of accounting for the pressure, and what type of adaptations are you making, or how do you account for it? Maybe might be a better way to say it.
I think it's more of for me, it's more mental than anything. I try not to get worked up when, like, I didn't really get that worked up when my camera was stolen today because it's part of the game. I guess like you're gonna have things that come up, and I look at it from if I was a predator, a wolf, you know, he's not going to get upset because something happened. He's just going to just find a way and figure it out, you know, a lion, wolf, whatever it might be. So for me, adapting to pressure is just not allowing it to affect my mindset of what I'm trying to accomplish.
Right.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that because, you know, Tony was here. He really struggles with that. If he sees somebody who's walked through the woods or sees a truck there, he won't hunt there, even though you're hunting 1,000 acres. Somebody's in my spot. Like, I don't want to deal with people. And he really allows like things that he has no control over to really affect his hunt sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. So I do, when pressure comes, I just keep it moving.
Yeah.
You know, I have enough spots. You know, I've talked about this numerous times. I very rarely will I hunt an area, there's only one spot. If things come up, the wind shifts, like some of my spots, you know, in the salt marsh, I'm driving an hour and 15 minutes. So I got 3 or 4 spots, you know, and I get there early enough where if somebody's there, if something happened, the wind shifts, I just go somewhere else. And don't allow it to, you know, get me in a bad mood or get me upset. You know, or try not to, I should say.
Yeah, you got to have, if you're hunting, well, I mean, just in general, right? It doesn't matter if you're hunting public or private, but definitely public because you have less control over that pressure. And you could say it's like I've hunted a family farm that had as much pressure, if not more on it than public that I hunt, you know. But it just goes to what you said in that last point. You've got to have plan A through C, A through D because of that. Like you just have to anticipate that it's going to be there. And it was something you and I talked about on the podcast from this past winter when we were scouting together. I made the comment, and it might even been a podcast before you and I actually got together and did one. But if you're hunting in a high pressure state, whether it's Pennsylvania, New Jersey, you know, Michigan, you know, is another one with a lot of pressure. You know, if you're going to be deterred by seeing human sign in the woods, like you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah.
You know,
you're going to struggle.
Yeah. Like you can't let flagging tape deter you. You can't let bright eyes deter you. You don't know when they're going to be hunting there. Like you should investigate the human sign to try to understand like, how recent is it? Is it from this past season? Is it from this season? Like, was someone here last week? You know, and do the best to figure out, like, well, how are they accessing? Like, right? It's like, you know, I always say in a lot of the spots that I hunt, it's like you almost kind of have to hunt the people as well. If you're going to hunt the same piece, right? Like, so maybe spot B is on the same piece. It's like, okay, well, how can I use that person's pressure? I was doing it last year in one area. I knew where the guys' stands were at. They were all set up. He doesn't take them down. I don't know if it's the same guy or a couple guys, but they're there throughout the off season.
So same trail, walking in, walking out.
I found his access. And I actually started using his access to get into some of the spots I wanted to hunt because I was like, well, he's using it already. So why am I going to walk somewhere else and booger up something? As long as my wind is going to play correctly for where I'm going to hunt, I'm just going to use his access, you know? And so you got to start to use it a little bit to your advantage. And then the other thing I did was I knew where he was at. He basically, his stand locations created a somewhat of a semi-ring around where I wanted to be. And so I just let his pressure move deer closer to where I wanted to be. You know, and so you have to start to use, it's a little bit of 3D chess. You got to start to use them as
it's
guide
chess, not checkers.
Yeah.
You know, you have to really look at that. You know, use people to your advantage. You know, like here we bait, you know, heavily. It's a very heavily baited state. And these deer will literally just skirt out wide, these bucks, you know, anywhere from 50 to 100 yards. They're just going to just scent check that bait before they come in most of the time.
Right.
You know, there's bucks do get killed over bait, you know, on public, you know. So I know that. I know that they're taking a wheelbarrow and their four-wheeler into the woods baiting. Like you said, I'm using that trail too. The deer are used to that smell there, noise, and I'll just go around that and just, you know, back toward that guy where, you know, any smart buck, especially a buck that's his core area, he knows what's up. You know, he's not going to make too many mistakes. You know, those guys are seeing them, but seeing and killing is not the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So that's how we would adapt to pressure. And this is probably, you know, folks out there listening, you've probably heard similar conversations around adapting to pressure. You know, it's not a. Well, Greg and I aren't inventing a new wheel here, right? These are things that, you know, anyone who's hunted pressured areas long enough, even if you don't learn it somewhere, you start to learn it through observation.
And even like New Jersey's extremely populated state. A lot of hunters, a lot of hikers, bird hunters, small game hunters, everything. So deer that grow up in public, born in public, that's just another walk, another day for them. They don't get upset when they smell a human. They're just like, oh, there's humans over there. I'll just go this way. You know, they don't. It's not like we were talking about earlier. You don't some of the spots, where them bucks catch
Don't see people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's
they
like,
catch a boot track, and they're like, I don't know what that is, but I'm out of here. Around
it's
here,
not supposed to be here is all I know.
like
Yeah.
I've worn leather boots. I've had deer come cross they get spooky, nervy, but they kind of move on because it's a high traffic area for humans. So that human scent's okay to them because
Right.
they come by there a couple times a week. It's like, oh, human scent, whatever. It's another day.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. It's they in certain areas, especially if it's a lot of pressure, it's like you don't have to relocate to the next state
Yeah.
to get a clean area to hunt.
Yep.
You're talking
You're
maybe-
limited in woodlot size too.
Yeah.
1,000 acres.
Well, they're limited to where they can go.
Yep.
Too. So you're not the only one limited.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you have to think of it in that context. It's like they can't just go stand in the middle of somebody's yard, or they can, but they're not going to.
Yes.
It's like, so figure out like where's the next best cover they would run to, especially if you have limited land.
Yes.
Right.
There's
Because that's
little
likely where
seams,
they're going to go.
like I call them seams in the big woods and even in the marsh. Those deer just funnel through. People don't go in there, be it wood or swamp or briars, and they just hold tight. It amazed me how much buck sign I found this year, down in Millville, just in between the old rows of stands. It's a real thick, nasty part, and you're like 7 yards away from a bunch of stands. Deer just probably just going through there all the time, and nobody's seeing them because it's so thick. And the buck's going to take 1 or 2 steps, stop, 1 or 2 steps.
Yep.
So it's just they find those little seams, little pockets where deer feel comfortable and they're going to move.
And it doesn't have to be too terribly far away from where the bad stuff is either.
That's
It's
right.
just cool. So I think we covered that one pretty well. Let's move on to the next one. This one is about traveling. So they're asking, when you're traveling and you come across some great sign, how many hunts do you give it before you move on? And what about, if this is a local piece versus a piece that you've traveled to? So you want to take this one, or you want me to take a stab at it first?
You start.
Okay.
I'm going to give a little thought to this.
All right. All right. So I think when I'm traveling and I come across really good sign, it depends on the time of year, for me. And the thing is like most of my traveling is done during the rut. This year I'll do a little bit of traveling in October, so it'll be a little bit different. With that, I move probably quicker than I should. I'll put it that way. And that's one thing that I'm kind of learning over time is as I'm talking to you, or whether I'm talking to Nathan Killen or whatever. It's like, I think a lot of cases I'm not, when I find hot sign or when I find the place that I want to set up, and sometimes it doesn't have sign. Sometimes you're just like, I found sign on my way in, and this feels like the spot where you need to be to kill on the way to, right? And that's the other part that I'm kind of learning and adapting. And so for me, I'll just give the example of being in Missouri last year. I would basically scout until I found hot sign. I would set up on it, and I'd maybe hunt it the evening, and I might hunt it the next morning if the wind was right. And then by like 11 o'clock or whatever, I'm down and I'm moving and I'm trying to find the next spot. So I might give it 2 hunts, or in total, I might give it like 8 hours of hunt time on it before I move on. When I'm local, I'm actually probably a little bit more patient. And you and I've talked about this. It's like I should probably adopt more of my impatient approach whenever I'm in state, and adopt more of a patient approach when I'm out of state. I mean, I do pretty okay out of state, but like I've probably missed opportunities on some really good deer by moving too quickly, especially given the time frame that I'm out there hunting during the rut. But locally, I will give it the piece a couple sits. This all, I'll preface this all by saying it really depends on what my access is. How clean can I get in? How clean can I get out? Did I have an encounter while I was there? Was it a good encounter or a bad encounter from the deer's perspective?
Yes.
Like, did they know that I was there? Did they not know that I was there? Because if it does, then I'm done. Then that spot's done. At least, for a couple days until I make it back and the wind is right or whatever. If it's local, it's probably done for a couple weeks before I go back. If it's not, and it's rut, and I'm capitalizing on deer being stupid, then I may only give it like a day or two, or I may even, if the access was good, but the deer had a bad reaction, I may not see that deer again. So I may hunt that again the next day, potentially, right? Because I'm banking on the fact that I'm probably going to see a different deer there the next time.
Agreed.
So for me, if it's great sign, I'm hunting it, and I'm probably moving off of it pretty quick traveling. But because I'm also trying to press the envelope because I know I only have so many days. So I'm just trying to see as much as I can and hit as much hot sign as I can. Locally, I'm probably a little bit more patient, but I probably need to be a little bit more aggressive locally. I probably just need to be a touch more patient when I travel. So I need to do a little bit of a balance. But I think the net is, I think when you travel, at least my perspective is, it also depends on if you've had an opportunity to scout that as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of times when I'm going out of state, I'm freelancing the whole hunt. Missouri was all freelance. Kansas will be all freelance this year. And so I don't have any type of historical information of what's going on at a specific spot. So that is another reason why I'm moving a lot, because I'm just trying to get in deer. Now, once I get in deer, the right kind of deer, I might slow it down and start to become a little bit more patient. But I would say on the whole, I would probably lean more aggressive, and I'll move more often traveling, and I'll be a little bit more patient whenever I'm at home.
See, I've super aggressive at home. I'm probably too aggressive because I'm always afraid some other hunter is going to swoop in and mess up that spot. Or there's, if I get 3 days to hunt, I'll, get one hunt here, next hunt here, keep pushing in and blow out that spot and move on.
Right.
Like sometimes I'm going all in on the first thing, and it's not good. Out of state, I was always too patient. I get to a spot, I'll sit it for 3 days.
Right.
I need to balance out a little bit better.
The opposite way that I need to balance out.
Like hunt with Johnny in PA, and Rick in New York, just they constantly moving, and it's like, okay, I can make that work,
Right.
Unless I know, I'm setting a scrape. Well, scrape locally, I'm gonna give it 2 or 3 days, because they're the cycle,
Yep.
Very rarely do I have bucks come into a scrape for 3 straight days, or every day. It's like, all right, little pocket of movement here, and about 2 days later, a little pocket of movement for a day or two. So if you're scrapes, I'll give it a bit, even out of state. I don't mind hunting for a couple sits.
Right.
But as far as like out of state, and for me, sign and stuff, because I'm primarily a bed hunter, so when I hunt out of state, usually it's already pre-scouted. So I kind of know okay, they're going to bed in this general area, and I can kind of set up, and I'll throw a sit or two at it,
Right.
But yeah, I guess we're very similar. Just switch it,
Yeah. Well, that's the one thing that I'm learning from you. I learn a ton of stuff from you, but just like just in general. Like
what not to do.
Yeah. Right. No, it's just having good hunting buddies, whether it's you or Chad or whoever that we talk. It's picking up those little things of going like, man, I probably need to dial back the aggressiveness in this particular scenario, and you get the advantage of seeing how your buddies hunt and how they're having success. You know what I mean? And having the conversations about, well, what am I probably missing, right? And then through my eyes of like what I do, right? It's like you can look at it and go like, well, here are some places where he's actually doing well, where I'm missing the mark a little bit. How do I recalibrate, right? And that's the cool thing is it's always to learn. There's no right or wrong answer, right? That's it's whatever you're comfortable with. And I'll say this, whatever you're confident in.
Yes.
If you're confident in moving, then move.
Yes.
If you're confident, like my buddy Ryan Glitsky, I don't know how many folks know who he is. I think I had him on a podcast at one point. Kills really good deer, but he is a dude that can go sit a rut funnel and sit for 5 days, and he will kill the biggest buck in the area. Like, but he can do that. Like
that's a hard sell, man. That is
and I can't do it. Like I can't sit that long like that. You know what I mean? But
like 3 days is like in the same tree hunting something. That's usually like my limit before I feel like I'm going to just go insane. Because there's no amount of books or no amount of on internet that can keep my focus for anything longer than 3 days. But it's like they're moving over there. I know they're moving over there. I pretty much just psych myself out of that spot, whether I'm not paying attention or I'm moving more or fidgeting, and pretty much the moment's gone basically.
Right. I need to have him back on because like he's a really good hunter. Like, and he will move and find the hot sign, but like he has conviction in what he's seen, whether it's trail camera data, his personal scouting, boots on the ground, and finding the sign. And once he has the puzzle pieces, and he's like, "This is it," that's it. Like he's going to kill it there. He might have to sit it 5 days, but it's going to happen, you know, and he just has that conviction. But that's why I was saying, whatever method it is you deploy, just be confident in it. Otherwise, if you half-ass either approach, it's not going to work for you.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like, just think about guys like the dudes from the hunting public, how often they move and stuff like that. How often do you think, and I'm sure they would recognize this, and I think I might even heard Zach talk about it at one point, how often do you think that they've moved off an area and a big deer had come by after they'd already moved? I'm sure it's happened because they move a lot, right? But they also kill a lot of deer.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So,
and you have to, like I said, it goes back to playing to your strengths. There are some guys, I mean, I've some old timers during gun season, they would sit shotgun, same stand, sun up, sun down, 6 years old. You know, back when I lived in Atlantic County, and some of these guys would kill bangers every year because they would literally just sit all day. They're not doing the drives, not doing anything. They're just sitting. He goes, "This is my vacation. I wait all year for this. I can sit in the streets and I don't bow hunt.
right.
I have 6-day firearm to kill a good buck." And they will literally sit, like I said, that conviction. I'm sitting this because I know all the driving and the ruts going on. There's something's going to come through here. And every other year they kill a really nice deer, and it's like, yeah, I don't know about that, man. That's very hard for me.
Right. So I think we covered that one. I think the net is like, be confident in what it is that you're, you know, whatever you're going to choose.
Be willing to try new things.
That's
Don't be so stubborn.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. And then, you know, maybe it makes sense to be a little bit more aggressive when you're out of state and dialing it back a little bit whenever when you're at home and you have a little bit more intel.
That's, you know, out of state for me, more aggressive.
Yeah.
And it's paid off the last 2 years in PA. I've hunted probably 20 different stands.
Right.
Which is unheard of. Johnny's like, "Get down. We're going somewhere else." "Where?" Down here." "No, get in the truck. Drive down here. Going about 300 yards. Look, you'll figure it out." And it's like, okay, I guess. And there's deer. And it's like, oh, all right. You know, it's like, that place sucks. Go somewhere else. And it's like.
Yeah, he's like the deer whisperer, man. All right, on to the next one here. This person is asking, what is your approach to scouting flat, thick hardwoods with no mast crop? So
Flat, thick as in like swamp, or thick as in undergrowth like browse?
I'd say either way. I think let's go either way. Let's do it both ways. So let's just go first with it's flat, thick with swamp, no mast crop.
That's a tough
Because
one.
I kind of have both of those right now in that piece up north that I've been scouting. That's basically all it is. It's areas that are flat and thick with just like almost like cuts or just like gnarly undergrowth. And then there's areas where it's flat and thick because it's, you know, it's a mountaintop kind of swamp section.
I would have to go back to my time hunting the Pine Barrens, where it's mostly pines. You know, if there is no, some years there's acorns, other years there's not. So the deer are just browse feeders. Is finding any type of edge features or anything, whatever people are calling it these days, transition zones, whatever, you know, where two
different types
meet.
of habitat come together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And walk that and find out what the deer are browsing on.
Yeah.
You know, I was never really a big food hunter, you know, hanging out with Rick and learning stuff from Johnny. It's like, you got to understand what they're eating.
Yeah.
Once you understand what they're eating, all the other puzzles, you know, you can kind of, you can make moves.
Well, you now understand like the puzzle pieces become not clear, but they start to make more sense now. Why they're at that spot during this time, why they're at this spot during this time. It's like now all of a sudden, like you understand, well, they're not going to be over here because this time of year, this is not there any longer. This is where their bellies are going to get full. Is over here.
It's fun. Any type of transition, be it, you know, a small creek, a ditch, you know, even, you know, trees that have fallen down, rotten trees. You know, in the Pine Barrens, a lot of rotten beetles came through in certain areas, and a lot of trees fell down. Well, that creates light down to the floor, which creates browse. You know, and the deer can feed on that.
Yeah.
So flat stuff, try to find out what they're eating.
Yeah.
And I always struggle with that because, you know, some spots, you know, I call them blueberry bushes. You know, sometimes there'll be blueberries on them, sometimes they're not. You know, I don't know what they really are, but they're chest high sometimes. Well, a deer's, I'm not really, because I'm always I need to scout 3 miles today to feel like I accomplished something.
Right.
Now it's like I'm always watching what they're nipping. What is this? I don't know what that is. Now with the cell phone, take a picture, and then you see it again. You're like, it's the same thing. Okay, they're browsing here, browsing here. When you see that bush or that branch, wherever they're eating, you're like, okay, I get that. And then there's a lot of it. Odds are deer are going to be coming, to it and bedding relatively close because, and one thing I learned hunting the big woods is, it's not like ag where it's bedding, feed, and strict.
Right.
Browsers everywhere in the big woods. But if they got a
concentration of it,
a lot of it, they're not going to bed a mile away because they're just missing out. They're consuming a lot of energy to get to this browse, so they're going to bed relatively close to the food.
Right. Yeah. People have to remember that deer, regardless of what their age is, there's definitely a stratification of where they want to bed based on. Oh, big word. Where they want to bed based on in relationship to their gender and also relationship to their age. Right. Like, so we get that. That becomes more significant as you get into October, November, right? Stuff like that. Early season for finding like summertime pictures or whatever, for example, right? They're all going to stay relatively close to the food.
Yes.
Like to your point, like bucks still don't want to be super social. They're going to stay away from the fawns and the does or whatever. But like, what's the next best layer of cover behind what that first layer of cover off the food is? Typically is going to be where they're at. What you said at the beginning of like those transition areas, I make no bones about it, man. When I go to somewhere new, like I'm not smart enough to be able to, I'm not good enough at e-scouting. Some people would maybe tell me I'm lying because I end up finding spots by doing that.
Okay. But, sure, Clint. Not good at it. Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that I am. So a lot of times when I go to these places, it's like I just look for diversity of habitat. To your point, it's like I want to find where two different types of habitat come together, whether it's like hardwoods and like a clear cut. That's a really obvious one. Hardwoods in a swamp, a clear cut in a swamp, like whatever that confluence of habitat is, I'll just start there and start walking and start finding sign and then start just following the sign. Right. And that, what you were kind of describing of that food where they're nipping, like I did that whenever I was up north. I found an area in the winter where they were nipping. I could see everything was nipped off. I had no clue what any of that stuff was, but I was like, it was a concentration of it. And I was like, they're clearly eating this. Let me hang a trail camera. Well, that's where I kind of found a quote unquote little buck nest this year. They're not, and it's like all daylight pictures. They're living right there.
They're bedding close.
Yeah. They're not living too far away from that. And then there's a ton of cover just around it in general. So it's one of those places that should hold true as you get into October, because it'll be, in the big woods in this area, when the foliage drops, like it becomes pretty open in a lot of areas. So this place will stay relatively thick, even when I was in there in the winter. And so you really just kind of need to kind of focus on where are those thick spots. If you're in flat, thick areas, right, with not a lot of mast, stay in the thick areas. Just by probability alone, you're going to end up finding food in there to some degree, some type of browse, and you're going to have better level of cover.
Yes.
And so that's where I would just concentrate my efforts. The flatness sucks because you don't know how they're going to move.
Yes. And one thing I'll add with the thick cover, like some spots around here, like Millville, it's laurel. So nothing really gets, so you stay in the thick stuff, and then as you're going through, you see the little pockets of light come down. Mm-hmm. And whenever there's this open pockets, I actually did a couple videos on it this year. Whenever I found these big open pockets in the thick stuff, boom, scrapes. Yeah. It was like a magnet for them, because they got, a football field basically of just laurel, and you're pretty much walking almost on your hands and knees sometimes. It's so thick. And then you just come into a light spot. There's food. There's usually like an oak tree, and there's scrapes. Right. So it's like they're going to use that cover. They're traveling, but then pop in this little open spot, grab some browse, make scrape, or find some buck sign, or lay down some buck sign.
Yeah. So it sounds like what we're saying is like, don't make it harder on yourself. Yep. Find those transition lines, the areas where habitat come together and you have some diversity, right? Those are always good. Stay closer to the thick stuff. Pay attention to what they're browsing and nipping on.
Deer edge, creatures of the edge.
Yeah. And then find what they're nipping on and understand what that is and find concentrations of it.
Yes.
And if you do that, you're going to likely find where they're spending some time feeding and probably not too far away bedding.
Yes. And I guess the next part would be with mass crop.
Mm-hmm. With no mass crop.
With no, what we just did.
Yeah, we just did. Yeah, that was the question.
Yeah, so now it's going to be with. We did a 2-part question that one, right?
Yeah, well, the 2-part was one was swamp,
Okay.
and one was not swamp.
Okay.
And so I think we covered both of them at that point. It's like find where the edges come together,
Yes.
right?
Edges.
Swamp's
Work the
going to be
edges.
way more obvious.
Yes.
Non-swamp is going to be a little less obvious. You're going to have to work a little harder. It doesn't have to be
And
significant.
boots on the ground.
Yeah.
You might be on the wrong end of the football field or the wrong end of the mile that you need to be.
Yeah.
So you need to definitely don't be afraid to walk.
Yeah, you're going to, in those instances, and that's what I found scouting up north this year, is like I just had to walk. I just had to walk a lot.
Boot leather.
Yeah, and it's paying off, but I mean that's really the only way to do it because it's not a lot of it's not super obvious on a map. You just have to go figure it out. I wish I had an easier answer, but it's literally just
And one thing I
time.
found scouting this year in the big woods by my house here in Millville is these bucks, a lot of big buck signs in thick, dark timber, like signpost rubs. And nobody can hunt. It's so thick and dark. Like you're literally losing probably 15 minutes of light hunting in there. It's so dark.
Right.
So much big buck sign in this because deer love, especially older mature deer. They just operate on a different wavelength. Mm-hmm. And so you get those dark pockets of timber. Usually they're going to be traveling through there during the rut. That's going to be the little safe zone. You'll find like rub lines in there going to and from a certain area. Mm-hmm. They're going to avoid the big open areas where people want to put a stand.
Right.
You find some buck sign in that thick stuff. It's hard to hunt it, extremely hard because it's just, unless you got a buckshot or something. Even buckshot would be hard in some of these spots.
Right. Yeah. So cool, man. I think we're good on that one. I think we can move on to the next question. So the next one is, it was pretty brief the way they kind of wrote it, but what I think they're asking is they're asking for, they basically just said freestyle hunting and / run and gun, right? So I think they want our approach, or how do we approach, that freestyle kind of
I'll
super
serve that
mobile.
one up for you. That is your specialty, out of state specialty.
I mean, there's a lot to consider and not a lot to consider. The not a lot to consider is that, you're not really doing any pre-scouting, right?
Yeah.
At least for me, I'm not. Whenever I'm truly freestyle hunting, it's like I don't really know much about the place.
You have to, I guess, define run and gun versus freestyle.
Right.
I think
I think there's two different things. Like, I would say Greg is a better run and gun hunter than me, because to me that almost goes back to the other earlier question that we had around how long do you sit versus not, right? Because run and gun to me is more what you do, which is like, you have information about an area, right? And you're playing that game and trying to predict how deer are going to move and what they're going to do based on the wind and based on thermals, based on what the feeding pattern and their bedding pattern, and you're moving actively to try to intercept them based on those things. For me, freestyle is I show up and I know jack shit, and I'm okay with knowing jack shit. And I'm going to basically just start working a piece of property and using some of the stuff we just talked about in the last question, depending on what it is. If it's that flat, thick kind of area, I'm going to look for the transition areas, and I'm going to start there. And I'm just going to start walking, right? And I'm going to pay attention to the wind, because I'm going to look at the map. I'm going to think, like, if I head here, where do I expect deer to be? And I'm going to want to keep the wind usually in my face. That's usually kind of how I want to roll, because I want anything I just walk through to be the place that gets blown. That's screwed, right? So I'm always trying to keep my wind in the face. It's not 100%. You're going to have to go around stuff, and it's going to not always work out that way. But the best I can, I try to keep it, in my face as much as possible. For a morning hunt, I don't go in until I have a little bit of daylight, especially if I don't know the spot, right?
That's that's super important.
It's critical, and I learned, and this isn't something I've made up. Like, this is like, I don't want anyone to think that I've created like the freestyle hunting approach or whatever. It's like, I learned a lot of this stuff from John Eberhard, because John Eberhard is like a master at freestyle hunting. It's who I picked it up from. It works well for me. It's worked well for him. And so going in daylight is critical, because the one thing you don't want to be doing is blowing a bunch of good hunting opportunity out by not being able to see what the hell you're doing. And if you're truly freestyle hunting, you're really just still hunting until you get to a spot that you want to set up on. And how are you still hunting or reading any sign if it's dark? Mm-hmm. You're not. You know what I mean? You're bumbling about and screwing up more than you're helping. And so wind in the face, not in until I have a little bit of daylight. And then a lot of times I'm just trying to find hot sign. And as I'm going, it's like I'm constantly reading my map and trying to look like, okay, what terrain feature am I in now? Where's the next terrain feature at? Oh, there's nothing here. What's the next thing I need to go check out? And I wish there was a more kind of eloquent, or scientific kind of approach to it.
It's a cat and mouse method.
Where it really becomes, cat and mouse is when you start to get a few data pieces. Like you start to find some scrapes, you start to find some rubs. And now you're kind of still actively looking at the map and you're thinking about, okay, well, what's my next move? Or is this the best stuff I'm going to find? So it really is like a combination of still hunting, and kind of mobile run and gun hunting. It's like a combination.
Intel.
Yeah, and you're just kind of making your calls on the fly, and you have to be willing to swing and miss. You're going to swing and miss often, but this is also whenever I'm super aggressive and I might hunt a spot for like 2 hours and get down and leave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then I'm off to the next, and you might, there were days in Missouri, this is whitetail hunting, so it's not like a ton of mileage if you were out west, but there were days that I did 6 miles before I set up. I started out at daybreak when I first got a little bit of light, and I didn't set up until I was getting ready for an evening hunt. I might not set up till 4:00 and I might hunt the last hour and a half of daylight, But the way I would do that is I would literally try, if it was good, I would now go in dark because I knew how to get there, and I would hunt that same setup for the morning the next day and try to get 2 hunts out of it, and that's as long as my access, and like I mentioned before, as long as my exit and entry was good, then I would do that. And then that would be the spot that I would start from the next day. Because now I'm getting down around 10 o'clock, didn't see any deer, getting down, looking at my map.
So almost like quadrant hunting.
Yeah. Where am I hunting next? And I just start walking until I find the next best sign, and just rinse, repeat. It's how I hunted Iowa. It's how I hunted Missouri. Stuck one in Iowa, hit one in Missouri, didn't get it, saw a bunch of bucks. And, that's really my freestyle approach. But I have a YouTube video on it. If whoever wrote that in, if they want to see more about it, like I did a video on how to set up for freestyle hunting. So you can check that out. But Greg's better suited to talk about the run and gun stuff than me. Because
run and gun, it's a term that's pretty popular these days. I grew up, I guess, a mobile hunter. My dad was we're going to hunt this piece of wood in the morning, and in the evening, we're going to drive 40 minutes and hunt somewhere else. So for me, bouncing around from new spot all the time, it's pretty much how I cut my teeth, I guess, hunting. So I was pretty much doing that from day one, For literally my first day out in the woods, we hunted three spots in one day. We hunted a morning spot in Penns Grove, the old blueberry farm, and then midday, my dad was like, we're going on the Mad Horse. We're going to hunt here. And then in the evening, we're hunting somewhere up along 295. Oh, all right. And that was pretty much our Saturdays.
Right.
Boom, 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 boom. We sat midday. Don't matter if it was, September or not, or October back then.
Right.
We always at lunchtime.
Yep.
So it's like, for me, running, gunning, mobile hunting, it was just something that I've always done. So I've adapted it and used it to my advantage, pretty well over the years.
Right.
And run and gun, being mobile, whatever you want to call it, is just you having all your gear in your back at all times. Back when I started, it was climbers or, crappy hang on, or a white bucket I painted that sat on the ground, so
right.
You don't need fancy gear to be a run and gun hunter. You can a white bucket. I've killed a lot of deer sitting on a white bucket, so just run and gunning is walking into, you find a hot sign, basically. It's very, similar to freestyle hunting, I guess, but you have a little more knowledge of the area.
Yeah.
And there was one morning I sat, daybreak, I see bucks on a bean field. I get up and move all the way over here.
That to me is the true definition of run and gun. Yeah. It's that real time. I saw movement. I'm 50 yards out of the game.
Yes.
I need to move 50 yards now.
And I ended up shooting the first time. I was a 2.5-year-old buck at the time. It was one of the last ones I've killed before I was like, I need to shoot something bigger. I was killing a few of them, and I was like, I seen a big buck come across the field, so I just made a mad dash with my bucket, grabbed my white bucket, and just ran as fast as I could because I had an idea where the deer's going to be. I come in and kind of looped, made like a big J, I guess, and sat down in the bucket. And then first 15 minutes of light, here comes this 8-pointer right in the woods. Shot him at 35 yards. I was like, and that year I killed 3 bucks from the ground all the way from October to January.
Yeah.
It was all ground hunting, and that was really an eye-opening experience, hunting that way.
It's interesting because they are very similar approaches.
Yeah.
I think the biggest difference, you hit the nail on the head, is one, you got a little intel, or you might know the area. You maybe you've hunted a couple years, and you're really just making reactions to like what you see deer doing and what's happening. And freelance is, or freestyle hunting in my mind, is truly showing up to a place that you've never been before and just figuring it out on the fly. So, yeah, you might run and gun within the hunt, but it really starts off as a freestyle hunt because it's just like a freestyle hip hop, like a rapper, right? You don't know what you're going to say until you say it, right? With freestyle hunting, it's the same way. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to see or what this property even has to offer until I see it, and you have to just make those decisions on the fly. But there is a point during the hunt where they become almost the same thing within the hunt, right? It's like the next day I might start out on a completely new freestyle hunt because I'm going to go to an area I've never been before again, where, within that hunt, if I see deer 50 yards away, I get down, like I'm running and gunning. Like I'm adopting both. I think they're both really effective. I think the other distinction is that it's not that like, I'm hunting here today and here tomorrow. Like that to me is like, you're just hunting. Yeah. Like run and gun to me is literally like that you're making those micro adjustments in the moment.
And that's where having all your gear on your back ready to go. I've killed a lot of deer. Just walk in, it's like deer sign right here. I'm setting up. I mean, I killed that buck last year.
Yeah.
I seen that scrape. I was like, I'm going to that bed. And I walked past him. I'm like, what are you, an idiot? Like, it's right here. Just go back. And it's like, that's like the worst thing. I'm like standing in the scrape, like, who cares? I'm going over here. I remember walking past it, and it's like, just go back there, you dummy. Just go back.
Don't look at gift deer in the mouth.
Basically.
Yeah. Don't look.
And that was being able to make that distinction. It's like, all right, I got all my gear. I'm ready to hunt like right now. Yeah. Like I don't have a hang on sitting there or a ladder stand. Like I have all my gear with me, and I've always been that way. I've only killed a few deer out of hang-ons in my life.
Right.
I've always had climber,
gear on your back. Yep. I think the other thing too is depending on where you're at. Like for example, this Kansas hunt's going to be all freestyle for me. Chad's been out there once, so he'll have a little bit of intel, and I think we have like 2 cameras out there. But like I've never seen the country. We're going to be doing all walk-in access areas, so that area is going to be a lot. Like my glass is going to be really important for that trip. And your glass is important in freestyle hunting because you always want to I should have mentioned this earlier when I was kind of talking about it. Like you want to try to be looking ahead of you as much as possible, right? And that's probably one of the things in freestyle hunting that I need to get better at is I don't look ahead of me often enough. And it burnt me in Iowa where I jumped that one big deer out of that CRP draw. And if I would have known, I wasn't as, not that I'm a good ground hunter by any stretch of the imagination, but I've learned a little bit in the past 2 years. My fatal mistake there was while I was walking with my wind in my face, whenever I saw an area where I was like, oh, there might be a deer bedded there, I failed to think about, well, he's looking at his back trail. Yes. He's looking directly in the direction I'm coming from, right? Because his wind advantage is to his back. And so what I should have done was stop and J-hooked around and try to get the wind angle on him to where I also would have the vision angle on him as well. That's just a learning lesson.
I think people underestimate how good deer see. Movement,
yeah.
They are extremely, and people talk about turkey all the time, and yes, but deer have, especially bucks, they can see movement. I mean, they see your hand move, anything from, 6 yards away walking through some brush, It's like,
they may not know what you are.
But they see movement. That's enough for them. Like, I'm good. I'm going back this way.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on how much nerve that deer has too. You get like the attitude, I guess maybe I should say, right? The personality of a buck. If you get one, it's like cock of the walk and he's like, well, what's that moving over there? Because I've also had them where it's like I've moved or made noise and they were like, hey, what's that? Come walking in like, who's in my area? But to your point, it's like most of the time, man, especially if you're in like pressure areas and stuff like that, they see a little bit of movement and they're like,
well, that's it. How many times you've sitting in your stand and you hear movement and you just snap your head and them deer are 30 or 40 yards away, and either that doe or buck's like, hey, what's up?
Right.
I'm out.
Just think about this. Like, you're not trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
And how many times have you been in a tree and just saw something that flickered where the light was different out of the corner of your eye and you were like, what was that?
Yeah.
And and it was the side of a body of a deer walking through the brush that you can't see it. It just the depth of the light changed.
Yeah.
And you knew something was there. Right. And you're not even trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
So think about the fact that they're trying to survive, so it behooves them.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Behooves.
Stratification, behooves.
Yes.
What's up?
Write these down.
Yeah. I better use these at work. But it's in their interest to see and notice those things. So certainly they're going to. But all right, I think we answered that one pretty well. We're only like 5 in. Like this would be like a month-long podcast.
We'll need a case of beer.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do those 2 things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, and Maven Optics. And until next time, we'll see y'all.